Okay, everybody, welcome to my first reading wrap-up in this house. I have not filmed a reading wrap-up since moving. And sorry, I'm out of breath. I literally was just trying to take the thumbnail. So the thumbnail that you see, understand that I'm holding just those two books and I've already had an arm day today. Really quick, before I tell you guys about all of the books that I've read in both July and August, I want to tell you guys about the sponsor of today's video, which is Squarespace. You guys know that I talk about Squarespace all the time on this channel, and I'm here to tell you about them again. Squarespace is 100% the way to go if you are needing to make a website for any reason. They make it as simple as possible to create your website and do literally anything on Squarespace. They offer you so many templates to choose from, and they make the templates easily customizable so you can build your website the exact way that you want it, that is true to yourself and your brand. They also offer so many data and analytics for you to use to make your website run as smoothly as possible. And for me, my favorite thing that I always like to highlight on Squarespace is their blogging format and how seamless they make it to be able to integrate all of your different socials into one place to make everything just seamless. As a content creator, that is my favorite thing. So you guys can head on over to squarespace.com to start your free trial, and when you guys are ready to launch, head on over to squarespace.com/JustiniSidwell to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. I'm actually so excited to just sit down and chat endlessly about these books. I kind of have a new way that I wanted to format my wrap-ups, which is that I feel like sometimes I rush myself through my wrap-ups, and I just really want to start taking my time with talking about the books and talking about my thoughts and thinking on them and not rushing through what I'm saying. So buckle up, this may be a longer style video. Let me know if you like it, and let's get into the reviews and analytics. As you can tell from the title, in today's video I'm going to be talking about my July wrap up and my August wrap up. I didn't do a separated wrap up for July because since I was moving in July, I did one reading vlog, and those were all of the books that I read in July, so I didn't want to literally release that reading vlog and then like 2 videos later talk about the books again. Oh, I forgot to do the analytics. No, I'm going to be putting up the July analytics right here, all of the books that I read. I read 7 books in July. I think 2 of them were fantasy, 1 was sci-fi, 1 was thriller, 1 was horror, 1 was romance, and 1 was historical fiction. I know that is right for analytic because these books were in the I read the best books that Goodreads listed so far of 2024. They did like a little mid-year check-in and basically released a list of books that were like the most highly talked about and most loved of the year so far. First up, we have Darling Girls. Now, this was the thriller that I had been seeing everywhere of everybody talking about it, and they were talking about how blown away they were by it, and like it was so dark and twisty, and I was going in expecting a lot from this book. Now, basically the premise is that you're following these 3 sisters. They were all put in the foster system together, and they basically were all living at this house together, and basically this house was on this like farming estate, and Miss Fairchild was their foster mother, and on the outside everybody told them how lucky they were, but maybe there was something a little bit more sinister going on behind the scene. It is kind of told in a past and present point of view via all of the girls of being raised in this house, and it's like them as women and them as children and them kind of recounting stuff. I will say that I think this one ended up, they were saying that it was like mystery, I think, is what this one's more cataloged as, not really thriller. I went into it thinking it was the thriller pick, which whose fault is that? It's mine. Because one of my main critiques was I went in thinking that this was a thriller, and the way that everybody else was talking about the book and describing it, I thought it was a thriller. And when I went in and it was more like it read more mystery, I was just really underwhelmed. I feel like me and thrillers are kind of, I don't know how to feel about them. I feel like they're one of the books that I am the most critical on, but I feel like it's because there are so many moving pieces within a thriller puzzle, which it's like you want it to have a good plot twist, you want it to be fast paced, you want it to catch you off guard, you want it to be interesting. Like there are so many things that make a good thriller that I feel like is a basis that everybody looks for. And so since this one read a little bit more mystery and honestly a little bit more literary, it felt more like I was reading a literary book with like a mysterious element, which hey, I'm describing a mystery book, I understand. But I think my main thing that I feel like is a little unfair is just that I went into it thinking it was a thriller. That was my main critique of the book. If I would have known it was reading more like that, I feel like it would have been different, but I gave it a 3 stars because even looking at it through the lens of like it being more of like a mystery piece, I just didn't find it super interesting. I actually guessed where the story was going pretty much from the beginning. It just wasn't super interesting to me. Nothing really stuck out to me through this book. I actually have not thought about this book once since finishing it. Having to recount my thoughts for you guys right now is actually the first time that I've thought about it. Didn't find the characters interesting at all. Felt very two-dimensional, which is interesting because that's usually not a complaint that I have in thrillers, because I've said very many times that in a thriller, I don't need the characters to be fully fleshed out. I don't need a whole entire backstory and to really care about them. But since this one was reading more literary and we were focusing so much on the girls, I would have thought they would have been more fleshed out as characters, but they weren't. Just didn't love this one. 3 stars. Next up, we have Murder Road. Now, this was one of the first horror books that I picked up. I've read horror before. I've read some of Stephen King's horror. I have said, especially after reading Darling Girls, that I wanted to get into horror, but horror like this and horror kind of like Stephen King, where my specific, I feel like, taste is more like scary, thriller-esque horror. Like, that's what I would really like. So I feel like more of what my tastes line up with, I could find in the horror genre. More high stakes. I want it to be creepy. Like, that is what I'm wanting. Murder Road. This is basically you are following a very newlywed couple, and they're on their way to their honeymoon. They're driving on this road late at night, and basically they come across this young girl who is literally like, looks like she has been through it. Like, she is bloody. She is like on the edge of her life, and they are trying to save her. They get caught up in this murder investigation. They're in this small town. They were actually driving unknowingly on Murder Road, where there's been a bunch of mysterious deaths on this road. I gave this one a 4 stars. I actually really enjoyed it. I will say that this one didn't give me a horror vibe. This one gave me more of like a thriller mystery vibe. Oddly enough, with this one, I really enjoyed the characters. Our newlywed couple that we meet, I feel like you don't dive too much. Like, it's not too much detail, but you get a little background information of them. And I really liked seeing them together. I liked their like vibe with each other, but even throughout it, you kind of don't trust anybody in the book, which I also like, because it's like, okay, do I like this character, or are they going to do something? Kind of that feeling of always looking behind your back. I found the mystery element of this very interesting, of like what was going on, and ultimately I just thought it was an entertaining time. I flew through this book. Next, I read When the Moon Hatched, and this one was pretty interesting to me because I had seen this on the list, and I feel like I had seen some people talk about it and it like rung a bell, but I still don't feel like I've seen a whole lot of people talk about this book. So When the Moon Hatched, I ended up giving this one a 4.5 stars. I loved the ending of this book. Basically, you're following Rave. She's basically an assassin for this group, and she's doing it like for good reasoning. She's taking out bad people, and you're following her through her storyline. That's the kind of loosely plot of this book. I don't want to go too much into it because I feel like there is so much to this plot. This world is deeply magical. I audiobooked a lot of this one, read the other half of it on my Kindle. I just really enjoyed the kind of imagery through this book. I enjoyed the characters, the storyline that we took. I will say that it starts out pretty high stakes. I feel like the stakes in the plot kind of lose itself like through the middle, which is usually something that I would really rant about, but honestly it worked with what was going on in this book. Like, we lost the plot, but I know it'll pick up in the second book. Like, we had to kind of veer off the road of the plot to build up for the second book and what happens at the end, but that was what kept it from being higher than a 4.5, is because we definitely lost the plot. And I feel like I remember saying this in the video, that I was just so confused as to where the plot went. It just then feels like a character study for like, I would say 60% of the book. Like the first 40%, you're like, ooh, what's happening? There's action, it's high stakes. You're like, oh, this is all set up this way. And then for the last like 60%, you kind of lose it. But at the end, it kind of brings the plot back in. And that's what made it very purposeful to me. Like, it felt like there was definitely a reasoning that we had to veer off and learn about like other characters or a main character. Like, we had to learn some things. And that still was a part of the plot. I guess I'm just saying like the main plot that I saw. I've definitely said the word plot way too many times. I enjoyed it. I thought the world was beautiful. And the magic system is very interesting in this book. There's actually like a whole entire glossary of like how the magic works. It explains in the front of the book like the creatures and beings and what the words mean. That's when you know we got a complicated world, when the author puts like in the front of the book, hey, this is what this means, before you get confused. I would also recommend the audiobook. I audiobooked, like I said, most of this one, and I just really enjoyed it. It was a really good time, and I gave it a 4.5 stars. I actually can't wait for the second book to come out. I really enjoyed the ending of this one. And then I also picked up The Book of Doors. This one, I found very intriguing. So the plot of this book, you're following our main character, and she works in this bookstore, and there is a old man that comes in every day that she loves to chat with, and basically one day he sits in the bookstore and just passes away right there, and she's obviously flabbergasted, but he basically left her this book. And in this world, there are books that hold different powers. So there's like a book of pain, and basically you can like put pain on people. I'm trying to remember all of the books. The Book of Doors basically lets you time travel. And I really thought this magic system was so unique and so intriguing to me. The thought of like owning different books and they have different powers and like you keep the book on you and it takes place in New York. I loved the setting of the book. This book feels so magical. I thought it was really fun. There's also kind of like some sinister twists going on. Like I was really at some points reading it and I was like, wow, I can't believe this is happening. Like it was pretty sinister and I really enjoyed that. There are so many different layers to the story and it is a very, very magical read. I literally took this with me one day to breakfast. I literally think Isaac has a picture of me reading the ending of this book. My jaw was on the floor. It gets high stakes at a lot of different points. I really thought it was such a magical and fun time and I gave it a 4 stars. Next up, we have Annie Bot. Now, I gave this one a 1 star. This one I thought was a interesting plot. It was a little bit of me stepping outside of my comfort zone for sure picking this one up. We're following Annie and she is this robot that in years in the future, there are these like 2 different models of these robots. One of them like helps you around the house, helps you clean, helps you cook. And then the model that she is, or she was made into because she started off as one of those robots that help you clean and cook, she is basically turned into this man's like pleasure robot. She is there for anything that he wants her to be there for. That is our loose premise with this one. I want to say and start this off with saying I understand what this book was trying to do. I understand that it's definitely commentary on being a female, being a woman in this world. I will say there are some very weird things that are said in this book that serve absolutely no purpose, that were insanely wild to me, that I don't feel like I see a lot of people talking about. It was crazy. Even just thinking about it. Like there was no reason for it other than I guess you could say to make the man horrible, but like I hate the excuse of saying the most wild things in books sometimes, and authors use as an excuse to be like, no, this is for you to hate that character. And it's like, I hated him before he said that, being ignorant. Like I hated him before that. It really grossed me out, and not in a way that I think was purposely done. I just didn't like the book. That's just what it comes down to. Next up, we have A Love Song for Ricky Wilde. I gave this one a 3 stars. I really enjoyed a lot of different parts of this book. This one also kind of has some magical realism in it, which I really enjoyed because I really do enjoy books with magical realism. Basically, in this book, you are following Ricky Wilde. She comes from this very rich and wealthy family. She does not fit in with her family. She wants to own her own flower shop. She has this business mindset. She has her own social media where she does these floral arrangements. Her family just kind of like does not appreciate her, very much down talks her like they are not very good people. So she decides to go off and do her own thing. She opens her flower shop in New York City. And then there's also another point of view thrown in here. And basically we're following the Harlem Renaissance. And like I said, there's some magical realism thrown in here. I really enjoyed this one. I think in a lot of ways that Tia Williams has a very good talent for poetic writing, really good quotes. And I feel like her romances always have this magical element to them, not like actual magical realism to them, but magical in the element of how the chemistry feels between these 2 people and how they interact. The way that she writes dialogue and interactions between 2 people literally feels like I'm a fly on the wall listening to people's conversations. Like it feels insanely real, because sometimes when you read romance books, these made up conversations feel like made up conversations. Like it doesn't even feel like this is how people would actually speak to each other in day-to-day life. I feel like Tia Williams does understand conversation between people, and she knows how to articulate that into a book to make it interesting. And I literally felt like I was watching a movie in my head. It was very atmospheric and beautiful. I will say I just was not extremely emotionally invested in the story. And lastly, for the month of July, I picked up Kristen Hanna's The Women. This was the historical fiction, and this was the first Kristen Hanna that I had actually picked up to read since reading Firefly Lane back in 2021. And Firefly Lane, since I read it in 2021, had been one of my favorite books of all time. I feel like whenever I would talk about 5-star reads, I would bring up Firefly Lane. I feel like I have been recommending that book for such a long time. So it was very surprising that last month was the first time that I picked up another Kristen Hanna book, even though she had been recommended to me so many times. The Women, I thought that this came out at the end of last year, but maybe it came out at the beginning of this year. 2024. Oh, I think... Wait, no. Basically, you were following Frances, and in her family, her dad is very big on like all of the war heroes in their family. He has like a wall of all of the men that are heroes in their family. This takes place during the Vietnam War. Her brother gets sent over to Vietnam to fight in the war, and then Frankie wants to earn her own spot on the hero wall, so she decides to go be a nurse and go be sent over during the Vietnam War to go help people. You were basically following Frankie through being deployed, what her life looks like, trying to help people in the midst of the war going on, and also what her life looks like once she gets back home. I thought that this book was absolutely amazing. I gave this book a 4.5 stars. It was so close to a 5. I feel like the only complaint that I had about this book was that the pacing kind of fell off for me, and the other 50% of the book, like the last 50%, there were a lot of spots in the book where the pacing started slowing down a little bit. I feel like if that would have been a problem, it would have been a 5-star read. It was just that since it started slowing down, my attention span kind of got lost a little bit. But this book was absolutely wonderful. One, for the first part of the book, her being deployed and sent over and helping people in the midst of this, I feel like Kristen Hanna cares so much about what she's writing. If you read her author's notes, she puts so much research into her books when she's writing about these real world events, which is why they feel so real. These feel like real people stories because they are. She takes a lot of inspiration in interviewing and talking to them about it, and then she writes about it, and I feel like that is so clear within this work. Talking a lot kind of takes my breath away. I will say the imagery of when she's over and she's being this nurse and she's trying to help people, and her storyline and arc of her nursing and how she learns to help people in her education in nursing as it goes on was very powerful, and she's a very powerful woman. When you first meet her, she's a completely different person than like 50% into the book. She comes home, and this is when the story kind of takes a turn, because then you start learning about how, especially in this book, women were treated, how everyone in America kind of treated her when she came home, and what happens with PTSD from being over in somewhere, seeing the things that she has dealt with. It was just such a powerful, deeply emotional story. I was brought to tears so many times. There's so many elements and layers to the story. There's love, there's friendship, there's womanhood, like so many different things layered within this. Those were all of the books that I read in July, so now we're going to go over to August. I read 15 books and I had 1 DNF this month. So first of all, I'm going to talk about these books pretty quickly because at the beginning of the month I did this reading vlog where I read some of my very nostalgic reads, like favorite books from my childhood. So in that I read Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Honestly, this was just kind of like a walk down memory lane. This is just like one of the little volumes. I think this is the first volume of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This was like one of my favorite things to read. I would read these over and over and over again, and this is actually like the original one that I didn't even know was banned. Like, these images were, I guess, too creepy for schools, and so like this one in particular I think is a big reason why it got banned. I do like the other volumes more. I think the other volumes, specifically I think volume 2 is one that was my favorite, and that led me down like so many rabbit holes as a kid. That is actually what got me into creepypasta as a kid. Anyway, also I read If I Stay. This one has a movie to it, and I don't think I've ever like actually watched the movie through. This one, you know, I don't really have much to say about it, honestly. So reread Divergent, and this one actually made me want to read the rest of the series again because I really loved Divergent. Divergent and Hunger Games when I was in elementary school were like two of my favorite things. I would just reread them and reread them and reread them. But it had been years since I had done it, and rereading this book just reminded me of just how good it is. I like the storyline of it, and I did say in my reading vlog that reading this, it was like eerily similar in some ways to Fourth Wing. I was like, this definitely had some inspiration for Fourth Wing. But then I also picked up The Fault in Our Stars, and I will say this one holds up. If you were not here for that point in time of what The Fault in Our Stars was doing for society in the time of like Tumblr and Pinterest and like 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, like those type of years, like the Alicia Marie years is what I call them. This book had everybody. In rereading it, I will say I just was really enjoying myself rereading it. Not that I expected to cringe at it or anything like that. I don't know how I feel about John Green's writing, because I did read Looking for Alaska a few months ago, and I just said I didn't really love the way that he wrote about our female main character. I didn't really love his writing in that one, and I kind of felt the same in this one a little bit. However, I did say this, and then I was reading reviews and people said that they don't think that this is true, but I said that I think that he did capture the essence of being a teenager and how teenagers talk pretty realistically. Like, I feel like this is actually how teenagers would talk, and a lot of the times with authors, when they write about teenagers, I feel like they do not get it. They write teenagers in a way that I feel like is not realistic whatsoever. But then again, I'm no longer a teenager, so maybe I am out of touch a little bit, but I just feel like this one was a little bit more realistic, and it does pack an emotional punch, and I feel like the romance is very sweet and wholesome, and their banter is really good. I think it's a good book. Next up, we have all of the books that I read for this video, where I read BookTok's saddest books. I asked for recommendations on TikTok for like the saddest books that anybody could think of. I fell in love with Hope. This was one that I've honestly been recommended for years, and I think the author actually came across my For You page, and then I had bought this book when it was like indie published. This book is about a group of friends. It takes place in a hospital. That's all I'm gonna tell you. It's a group of friends in a hospital. You can probably start putting some pieces together. I don't want to give away too much. This is told via a like all-knowing narrator, which at first I didn't love, and then I did grow to enjoy because the narrator is a character within itself, and I thought that was interesting. You start learning about the narrator because it's kind of a question mark in your mind as you go through the book. I feel like that was an interesting touch. I will say this, I feel like this author has good writing. I feel like they are able to find and piece together sentences in a beautiful way. What I thought though while reading it was that we would go through these paragraphs that felt kind of a little bit all over the place, not a lot to do with what we were doing. So I'm going to give you an example. Say two characters were having an interaction, and then you go into the narrator having this profound thought within the paragraph, to then say like a sentence that is very poetic and very beautifully written, but it feels like that whole entire paragraph was just kind of an excuse to have like a beautifully written sentence, and it didn't really fit cohesively within the story itself. I felt a lot of that within the book, where it just kind of felt out of place, felt like puzzle pieces were not fitting together. Lyrical writing as an excuse to have like a highlighted sentences, if that makes any sense. I just feel like the writing wasn't very cohesive. Like, it was beautiful, but I feel like poetry would probably be a little bit better for this author. Like, I feel like that's what it felt like. You were trying to fit poetry within a paragraph, and it didn't really make a lot of sense. You guys, this is where honestly kind of from here on out I was having a great reading month. And so first of all, we're starting with Btown by Frederick Bachman. This one was a unexpected 5-star for me. This book was so good. I started this book via audiobook. You are following this tiny community deep in this forest, and in this town, hockey is very, very important to them. So you're following a lot of different people. You are following the guy who kind of like not owns the hockey team, but he like kind of is an owner of the hockey team in a way. And then it's like high schoolers. And then you get the point of view of like the hockey coach. You get the point of view of this girl. You get the point of view of the girl's mom, and then the dad, and then another kind of figure over here. You get like miscellaneous point of views. Like, you get pretty much a lot of different people's point of views. People on the hockey team, friends, all of this stuff. But they all come together to make like a masterpiece. You are reading about this town and how much they love hockey. And that's kind of what I want to leave you with. Something happens and you're kind of reading everybody's like stories and collection of thoughts of around this event. And I just want to leave it at that, because honestly, I probably am not explaining this in the best way to make you want to pick it up, but I gave this one a 5 stars. I cried so many times while reading this book. I feel like this book was so powerful. And I will say, from a woman's perspective, one of the plots of this book made me deeply emotional, because I feel like Frederick Bachman took a lot of care in writing that plot, and it felt very realistic of what women go through with a plot like that in real life. And it was very interesting to see the way that everybody in this town treats this plot because of their love of hockey. It's honestly such a powerful story of friendship, parenthood, growing up, stuff that happens. There are like so many different ones. In one point, it kind of feels like coming of age, but then you also get point of views of like parents and parenting and what that feels like, and also marriage and relationships and hardships that you face as a person. There is so much in this book, and literally it's just basically said to be about a town who loves hockey, and it is so much more than that. It is a deeply emotional story with so much packed into one book. I could not stop thinking about this book while I was reading it. If there was any time that I put it down, I just wanted to be back into it. I honestly would recommend this as like a cozy winter book. So if you want to wait until like the wintry months to pick this up, I definitely think that this winter I'm going to continue the other two. This is like a series, and there are 2 other books in it, and so I think I'm going to pick up those other 2 later on into the winter month. Next up, I finally read The Nighting Gale by Kristen Hanna. This, honestly, again, is one of my most recommended books of all time, like of what you guys have recommended to me. I gave this one a 4.5 stars. It was very, very close to a 5. It just didn't give me that 5-star feeling. In this book, you are following 2 sisters, and they basically have these 2 different storylines surrounding World War II and what they're doing within this war and what is happening in their lives. You know the history of World War II, so you kind of know what to expect. I will say that this one takes place in France, so you're kind of getting that point of view of that country during this time. And again, when I say I read the author's note for this one, and Kristen Hanna talks about the real life stories that inspire this book. And I will say that that is one of my favorite things about Kristen Hanna, is the research that she puts in with these books. And that is why it feels so real, is because again, she takes real people's stories and puts them into a fictional element, but a lot of it is historically accurate. Like a lot of it is actually what has happened in history. It gave me the chills. Like even now thinking about it, I literally have the chills talking about the book, the ending of this book, and just all throughout it, honestly, you are on the edge of your seat. You are literally like sick to your stomach at some part. It's so emotional and you just want to cry. And like the ending of this book, y'all, I am not joking. It's actually like my eyes are stinging. Next up, we have another unexpected 5-star book for me. And that is a book that had been sitting on my TBR for such a long time, and yet again, maybe I should start listening to you guys. You know what I mean? You guys have been recommending me this book for literal years. I am pretty sure that I've had this sitting on my TBR, and I finally picked it up, which is A Man Called Ove. I know I'm pronouncing this wrong. This book, I always forget the actual pronunciation, so I don't want to butcher it, but I gave this book a 5 stars. You guys, when I tell you that this book actually changed me as a person, you may not look at this book and think you were following a grumpy old man who you cannot help but fall in love with. Like, you literally are just following the story of his life, and it does a little past and present point of view, and you're just following him through like his little daily routines and what he does and like people that he meets and stuff that he does for people. When I tell you, I was literally in shambles reading this book in so many different parts. Frederick Bachman, I feel like, has a talent of putting so much into one book, like so many different topics. Again, parenthood. There are so many different things talked about within one story pertaining to so many different characters, but also sticking to our main character. I just, like, you can't help but absolutely fall in love with our main grumpy old man. And when I say this book changed me as a person, I have recently been living by this motto of like, I will never live this life again, especially after reading this and kind of seeing basically an account of in the present point of view, and then you kind of get the past point of view of his life, and then stuff that he says about like different things that he lived through and all of that stuff. It just made me realize like stuff that you'll never live again, and like all of the stuff that actually matters in life that you like take for granted and like you don't want to take for granted, and also just how to treat people, and kindness goes such a long way. And this book has stuck with me. I made everybody in the house watch the movie, and it was so sad. Realized that I really love books with a very emotional plot to them. I feel like if the emotional stakes are high, I'm going to rate it highly. I mean, I feel like it's literally here in the cards of my ratings and reviews. The one DNF that I had this month was How I'll Kill You. Honestly, I don't want to talk too much about it. I read literally over 50% of this book, so that's why I feel like I can talk about it a little bit. This book is basically about this girl, and she has 2 sisters, and basically they all kill people. They kill men primarily. Basically, they all take turns killing people, and they find like one man make him fall in love with him to kill him. And you're following her, our main character, and she finds this guy, but then she's like actually kind of like falling for him and doesn't want to kill him. And you're following that storyline. It is just honestly so uninteresting. Like, I knew what was going to happen. It's very clear, like, what is going to happen throughout the whole entire book. I actually, like, did skip to the end because I knew, like, I was never going to read it, but I just wanted to make sure that I was right. Like, what I thought 100 times, I was like, oh, I will be mad, though, like, if I skipped the end and find out that I wasn't right and I should have just kept reading the book. But no, I was right. Next up, everybody, read one of my books that I wanted to read in 2024, one of the 24 books that I wanted to read in 2024 this month. That was 11/22/63 by Stephen King. When I tell you guys, I read this in literally less than 2 days. I was hooked. I ended up giving this one a 4.5 stars. It was so close to a 5. It just didn't give me the 5-star feeling. I know a book is good when I look at other people in my life and I have to tell them about the book. Like, people who do not read, who do not care about what I do, honestly, okay, that's really dramatic, but they just don't read. Like, they have no interest in reading. And when I have to go and tell them, hey, what do you think about this plot? You know? And then when they're interested in the plot, though, I'm like, well, read the book. Read the book. You're interested in the plot. I guarantee you'd like the book. In this book, you're following Jake. And Jake is a high school, pretty sure, English teacher. And he frequents this diner a lot. And one day, he notices that the guy who owns the diner is looking pretty sick. And he's like, what is going on? That man then says, hey, come to the diner with me. I have to show you something. He shows him that there is a time traveling closet in the restaurant and tells him that he has to go in time and save JFK from getting assassinated. And so you're following the storyline. So this whole entire plot is a time travel plot, but it is so much more than that. When I tell you, one of the main things I had been seeing when recommended this book was that it doesn't feel 850 pages. And that is one of the most annoying things for me to hear, because it's like, yes, it does. You know, like, this is what you think before going into a book like that. Like, don't lie to me. Yes, an 850 page book is going to feel 850 pages. No, it doesn't. I will speak from my personal experience that this book did not feel that long. I was flying through this book. I just found it so interesting. Like, the whole entire time travel, also the plot. You are always rooting for our character. Always. Like, I feel like even the things that he's doing within the story and trying to accomplish, even outside of saving JFK, it's just so good. Also, we take a little stop in the town of Derry in this book. And if you are a reader of Stephen King or know anything about it, oh my gosh, I loved that. Y'all, I love it. I love Stephen King's universe that he has orchestrated and created. I really want to read more of his book. It was thought-provoking. And if a book is thought-provoking in a way like that, I feel like it's great, you know? Anyway, 4.5 stars. Loved this one. This is another one of the 24 books I wanted to read in 2024, partly because when I read City of Bones, oh, that was not last year. Was it the year before last that I read that? I actually can't remember, but it does feel like a while ago. The way that book ended, I was like, I have to spoil this for myself to see if this is like actually a thing. Because if it's actually a thing, I'm never picking up another book in the series. Like, that's just how it's gonna go. Found out information, and then I was like, okay, I just have to get through the next 2 books. Then you go and read the 3 books of the Infernal Devices. Then I come back to the Mortal Instruments. However, knowing the information that I knew and knowing that goes through 2 books, I didn't want to pick up the 2 books. I didn't want to read about that. I finally picked up City of Ashes, and I audiobooked it because I actually don't think I could have physically read it. However, I gave it a 3 stars. I really honestly enjoy the world of this. I like the characters. The only reason that this is a 3 stars and not like a 4 or above is because of the romance. It is so unnecessary, and I wish I could go into it. It is so unnecessary. Absolutely insane. Basically, if you guys didn't know, this is the 2nd book. I actually also read the 3rd book, which is what I'm going to be talking about next. But this is a part of the Mortal Instruments series. This is part of the Cassandra Clare universe, and I'm not going to go too much into the plot of these books because they're literally like continuations of the series, so you're going to have to read the first one, which the first one, they're basically urban fantasy books. Basically, they just have that magical fantasy element. Like, there's vampires, werewolves, demons, like stuff like that going on in this world. It's set place like in New York and in real life. But yeah, the romance in this book, I had my jaw on the floor, like absolutely insane. I actually could go on a full rant about it. Unfortunately, I'm not going to do it here. Then I picked up City of Glass, and I actually ended up giving this one a 3.5 stars because I enjoyed the plot a lot more in this one. This one, they go to the City of Glass. And just everything that's happening in this book, it was a lot more high stakes, a lot more action going on, a lot more pieces of the puzzle that started getting thrown in there that I really enjoyed. Like, I started enjoying that the actual fantasy element started building up in this book. I feel like it wasn't building up in the other two books, and I see potential in this one. And also the way that this book ends, I was like, thank you, I made it through, I got through it. So now I feel like I could actually, not that I didn't enjoy these, because like I said, even on the audiobook, I was really into the plot of the book, like in the fantasy, with the side characters, like with what was going on. I will say with like some of the characters, like for example, one of the girls, I think her name's Isabel, I don't love her. I feel like she's kind of rude to our main character majority of the time. Like, I don't love her at all. I do enjoy the plots of these books and stuff, and I could see liking the other three, because there's 3 more that you go into after going into the Infernal Devices, which is a whole entire different series. It's a prequel to the Mortal Instrument. I feel like I could like the other 3 Mortal Instruments more, possibly. Oh, okay, I forgot about this book. I wanted the physical copy of this book. I could not find it anywhere, but we're gonna talk about it right now. I read the book Summer Fridays. I got this as a skip the line copy from Libby, and I get so excited anytime I get a skip the line copy book from Libby. Libby is an app. It's like ebooks and audiobooks from your library. So I have like my library card, and I use Libby and get ebooks and audiobooks, and I can read them on my Kindle. And I am always looking at the skip the line copy. They're basically lucky copies, and instead of getting them for 14 days, you get to read them for 7 days. So it's obviously like a shorter loan span, but they're usually books that are very popular, very talked about. And it's kind of sometimes how I find books that like are maybe on other sides of the booktube or book talk that I don't see and I get to find. So this one popped up, and I was like, this is interesting, because I personally have not seen this come across in anything. And this is a romance, takes place in New York. I absolutely love those. And basically it takes place, the first part of it is in like 1998, I think. And then there's also like the present point of view, which is like right after 9/11. That kind of plays a small role in the book, but it's not honestly a huge thing. It's a pretty minuscule part of the plot. You're basically following our main character, and she is engaged, and she's about to have her wedding, but something is a little amiss. Something is going on. I was so conflicted the whole entire book, because again, with a conflict, I could list so many different things of how this book could have gone, or even like the conflict that we had. It should have been wrapped up within the first 20% of the book, and then we could have went on to the love story. Instead, the conflict is not wrapped up, and then you go on this whole entire book with this love story that was swoon-worthy to me. I thought the chemistry and the guy at times, because also the guy was a little bit confusing to me, because he would say like some misogynistic things, and that was kind of just like a quirky part of his character, and I was like, no, like maybe not, like that's just a choice that you made anyway. And he would do like kind things. He was very attentive to her, making these extravagant date ideas, was very sweet, like in so many different ways. And the romance was sweet. I thought that he would do things that were very swoon worthy, but then like in the whatever of their relationship, I would be like, oh, this is so sweet, but then I'd be like, but wait, what? Like, it took away so much, because I rated it a 3.5, and it would have been like a 4 to a 4.5 if we weren't in the circumstances that we were in this book. I will never understand it. Like, I could not actually full on root for these people because of what this book was doing. You start off villainizing these people in the beginning, and you're like, oh, they suck. But then our main characters turn into that, and it's like, you know, so 3.5. I thought the atmosphere was so amazing, and like I said, I found the romance swoon-worthy, but it was just the circumstances. Next up, I finally read Reckless by Lauren Roberts. I gave this one a 2.5 stars, which is a pretty big jump from the 4.5 that I gave Powerless, which I did really enjoy Powerless. I feel like it is a very strong debut for an author. I feel like it is a good young adult fantasy book. Part of it was literally just copy and paste that scenes were taken from Powerless, put directly back into this book, and like the wording was just like flipped around a little bit. Big thing when Powerless came out, I feel like one of the things everybody was talking about was like, oh my gosh, like the dagger to the throat, the enemies to lovers, like it is so good. And I feel like maybe this was taken and ran with a little bit, like knowing that people liked that, so she did it times 100 in this book. Like literally, there are so many of those scenes in this book where it gets repetitive and it loses its touch. When you do too much of something, it loses the value. Like you can't keep doing that and expecting the same reaction, because you literally do it like 20,000 times in this book. Obvious dramatization, obviously not 20,000 times, but felt like it. And then there was just an endless repetition in the book. So it's like, we're playing cat and mouse. Oh, we catch up with each other. Oh, dagger to the throat. Oh, I'm slipping a secret dagger in my boot. Like, whatever. Oh, we're having this banter between us that we just have the same exact conversation like 10 times throughout the book, and we get nowhere with it. Oh, I like you. Oh, no, don't touch me. Oh, no, whatever. Oh, no, maybe we are. Like, I do love her. I can't help but loving her. Oh, no, we're in trouble. The only way out of trouble is to act like we're in love. Like, that is the endless cycle through this book, and it was just so uninteresting. Like, nothing was happening. It was just the same scenes over and over and over again. Going into this book, I know that a lot of people were talking about how they felt like this was a filler book, and even that we can talk about. The idea of a filler book in fantasy, I personally will never understand, because I don't need a filler book. I promise you can just put the information in a whole entire other book that has more of a plot. Please do that, actually, because absolutely nothing happens in this book. I feel like you could have just made this a duology and this been like the first like 30% of the book, and then what happens at the end, which is the only actual enjoyable part of the book that actually was spoiled for me. And I know my jaw would have been on the floor, and I really would have deeply appreciated that if it wouldn't have been spoiled for me. I'm not discounting the book for that. I do actually give points to the book that is a part of the 2.5 stars, is because I really did enjoy the ending. However, I do think that this whole entire book could have been condensed down to the first 30% of a book, and then the last 70% could have been what the ending was and then dealing with it for the rest of the book. I don't think we need a whole lot going on. Also because honestly, in this world, there's not a high fantasy system. It's not very complicated world building. Like it's not like we're like fighting this force that is like a big world system, like a big enemy. There's not even that. I picked up Fragile Sanctuary by Catherine Cowles. I have just been in the mood for like some of these romances that are just like small town, fun vibes, very little brain power used. Like, they're just like so good for my brain. Like, I just love sometimes reading books like this. I gave this one a 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I like the small town vibes, specifically in this book, and that I also find in Devney Perry's books, that they have the small town element, but they also have like a little mystery element to it. We're following Rhodes and Anson, and basically Rhodes is getting a complete renovation on the house that she owns, because it's actually her family's house from back in the day. Something completely tragic happened. She's renovating the house, taking over her life, and trying to like rebuild her life up. And then Anson is one of the people that are working on the renovation and rebuilding of the house, and it's actually her brother's best friend. So we're going through that plot and that romance. Two people, they kind of have like traumatic past. And then also there's the mysterious element going on, and I just ate it up. I honestly thought that it was a very fun and enjoyable time. I had a good time reading it. It was a 3.5. I think that it's good. The very last book that I read this month, I finally got the time to pick up Play Along. This is the 4th book in the Windy City series. Absolutely am loving this series, minus the first book. I love every other book in the series. And this one, I could not wait for. Ever since I read Caught Up last year and getting the glimpse of this couple at the end, I was so excited for it. I gave this one a 4.5 stars. Loved it. This one, you were following Kennedy and Isaiah, and basically Isaiah is on this MLB team and Kennedy works for that MLB team, and basically they're not allowed to date, but they have this drunken night in Vegas and they drunkenly get married, and they basically have to act married to everybody because there's a bunch of other things at stake going on inside of the book. And I loved it. I love Isaiah. I also loved Kennedy. She's very relatable, honestly, in a lot of ways, and so is Isaiah for me. I related to different aspects of both of the characters very heavily, and I love when I can do that in a romance book. I don't need it. Like, I don't need to relate, but it always does add a layer when I can relate to the main characters. Like, I really love that. I just really like this. Isaiah is definitely a like acts of service, very attentive, literally head over heels for Kennedy, and I love reading about a man being a simp. Like, I absolutely love it. I have been talking for a long time. I've been talking for over an hour over on my part. I don't know what this video has been condensed down to, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's wrap up. If you guys did, you guys know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff you guys know to do. These are actually some of my favorite videos to film. I love sitting down and just like full on chatting about the books that I read. So can't wait for next month. Hopefully this month is a good month of reading. I've started my fall reads. Very cozy. I just decorated for fall the other day. I'm in the best mood with the seasons right now. Like, today's a gloomy day and I can't wait to just like cuddle up and read a book later. So thank you so much for watching. I love you guys so much, and I will see you guys when I see ya. Peace.